races like this, I think, just highlight and hopefully magnify the importance that athletes should take on learning their body and understanding what feels and truly is easy, what truly is and feels hard, and then everything in between. And on a day like yesterday, the most disciplined athletes that put ego aside and expectation aside, and the only thing that they focused on was the discipline of effort and the discipline of execution, were the ones that did the best.
Fresh off the Ironman Chattanooga spectating experience, here we go.
Mike Terali, Robbie Bruce, we bring you the Crushing Iron Podcast, episode 307.
How about 308? We did
really?
pop-up cast.
I forgot we did the pop-up cast on Saturday.
Preview.
And, a little chat preview. We did it at the Blue Plate, which is one of our favorite breakfast spots and all-around favorite restaurants here in Chattanooga. But yes, it is the day after Ironman Chattanooga. You and I were both here. You were actually, and as a show of how committed and consistent we try to be, you were actually at my house this morning here in Chattanooga, made the drive back to Nashville. We're now recording the podcast to make sure we get in our twice a week edition. And if this is your first time joining us first, we appreciate it. Thanks for giving us your time. If it is your first time, again, just go back and listen. We have 307, you just said, podcasts in the archive.
Yeah, there's probably a few bonus casts in there.
Yeah, there's probably a few bonus casts in there. Take a listen. We cover a wide variety of topics. We do the very rare, on occasion, guest interview. That's not our thing. But generally, our podcasts are centered around both you and I's experiences as coaches and athletes, and then also as just humans trying to navigate triathlon and really just endurance sports in general, and how they complement our life and the kind of obstacles and issues that can arise, the good and the bad. And then we just do our best to share those experiences of our personal ones, but then also the ones that we have with our athletes, and then people from our closed Facebook group that we have, and that's what we kind of use for our material. And we try to kind of have a fluid and hopefully beneficial conversation for you to take things and apply it to your daily life and training. So that's what we do. That's what we at least attempt to do. And today we'll recap and take some lessons from things that we saw and observed and felt and learned from Ironman Chattanooga yesterday. It was a bit toasty.
Yeah, it was. First of all, I'd like to thank the hundreds of people that came to Blue Plate that day when we were having our pop-up podcast.
And really what Mike's trying to say is we want to thank Laura, our server, for making us feel like one in a million, because she was easily our best and only spectator. But
yeah, man,
it was still fun. I enjoyed doing that, and I'm not a big public guy, but that was that went better than I thought. I actually enjoyed putting on that cast.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. We're not like there's a lot of opportunities, I guess, we're kind of low key, man. I like doing it. It was cool to be on the ground right next to the expo, just kind of watching what was going on and everything like that. But it wasn't really about having a big audience, even though the Blue Plate was packed that day and nobody noticed us sitting in the corner. We had about 2 or 3 people come by. That was cool.
Yeah,
that's kind of how we like it.
And that's probably half our listener base. So hey, we'll take 50%. But yeah, it was a hot day. We had Ironman. There was a lot of hot action going on this weekend. You had Ironman Maryland, which happened on Saturday. You had Augusta 70.3. You had Chattanooga yesterday, and here in the South, it has been just brutal heat. We have been breaking records every day. I think it's 95 again here today, and I think it's going to get even hotter here the next day or two before it hopefully finally cools off this coming weekend, and has really put my grass watering mentality and schedule on display, as you were kind of joking on me last night as we got back from a late night spectating adventure at Ironman Chattanooga. We got back to my house, and the first thing I did was
say to me, I'm so glad to be back. I got to water my lawn. I said, man, you've been thinking about that for about.
I like it, man. I like the process. I like maintaining. I like the maintenance of the lawn. But anyway, we were there. It was a busy weekend. I know that Ironman Maryland again was on Saturday. We had some athletes doing that. And from the pictures and the feedback, it looks like a tough race. And listen, like they're all tough. They all have their own. Like rarely is there ever an Ironman or 70 point or really any race that you could probably say like the conditions are perfect. Like this just rarely ever happens. And so I think again, like, and we say this, like the toughest race you're ever going to do is the one you're training for right now. And if you take races for granted and you assume that things are going to be easy and you assume that because it's in a specific time of year that you're going to get favorable temps, so you don't have to worry about things. If you assume that the race course is flat, so you don't have to worry about doing extra riding, and you end up getting wind, you're going to be behind the eight ball for that. If you assume just because there's a downstream current, you're not going to worry about the swim, and then it usually ends up being wetsuit legal. Then you find out the day before, like here in Chattanooga, the water temp's like 80. It's not wetsuit legal, and the flow is fairly slow. So compared to what it usually is. So again, like I think it just goes back to something that we talk about a lot is that you can't take any race for granted. You can't always kind of rest on what you originally thought a race was going to be when you signed up. And I think there were a lot of lessons learned this last weekend, and the athletes that were at least we've seen on from text messages and emails and Facebook posts that it seemed that last week's podcasts and the week before even we really harped on patience. And one I saw this morning was when I said you should be annoyingly patient.
Mm-hmm.
From everything that I've heard, it was one of those weekends where the the smartest athletes were the ones that did the best. So kudos to everyone again for first of all competing, getting to the start line healthy, and for making their way through what was a tough weekend all around.
Yeah. I wonder if Iron Man is contemplating moving that race back a week yet. I
It
mean,
was it
it's
was perfect here last week or 2 weekends ago, I guess now, but the weekend before it was beautiful. It was just
yeah,
beautiful.
it was
Uh,
beautiful the first 2 years they had it, and now it's
yeah,
just been hath and fury, hell and what's that saying?
not sure, but it's not that. It's definitely not whatever you just tried to,
You
you
know what
know.
I'm saying, though. No, you bring up a really good point. I think when you assume all of us will look at if we haven't been there, especially, and even if we have been there, sometimes you forget. It's so easy to forget the course, even though a lot of us that have done Chattanooga, and I've done the half multiple times and the full once, and I think everyone tends to forget, especially on that full, that everybody thinks about Barton Road and that backside of that full run course, but you forget how awful that road leading out of transition is, that part of the course, and it may be in some regards the toughest part of the course. It's on kind of a rougher road in the sun. It's hillier
Hmm.
than you think. It goes on forever. You end up in a Burger King parking lot and all this weird
Burger King
stuff.
parking.
I don't know if that's still true or not, but you know what I'm saying. I think that is a real backbreaker of a stretch, and it's right out of the gate, and then it's right out of the gate when you do your second loop when you're just demoralized. So it's hard to remember or think about things when you're just looking at an elevation chart and things along that nature. And um, it's it's uh, it's a tough run, as we know. Um, I think that whole idea that I was thinking about that, of course, on the way home, and so many of us, no matter what race it is, we're just not used to coming off the bike as hot as we are going to be that day. And we've talked
Hmm.
about it many times, but the reason I think about it too is because, obviously some people, and we can get into this later when we were talking about the remarkable consistency of some of these superstar pro athletes or even age groupers, how they keep the consistency. But for the most part, when you get off a bike in something like that, you're probably, even if you're patient out there, or at least you think you are, you've never been in those conditions, or because you're racing against people, and whether or not you think you're racing them or holding back, you're probably put in 1,000 different decisions, like you always talk about, whether or not should I stick with this, or should I pull back, or do I want to pass on this hill? Those are the things we don't face normally in training, So we kind of get out of our element probably just a little bit. And my theory on this is that you get off that bike in a race with probably using more effort than you used to, and then literally the temperature feels to you 5 to 10 degrees hotter than it maybe actually is, even with feels like, because your body is just that much hotter, and we're not used to that, and that's a tough one to come back from.
Can we just stop the debate about what's more beneficial about racing and listening to your body by feel, and even in training, and not just being married to numbers 24/7? Like, I can't. Every time athletes race, our athletes, we reread other articles and see other posts and we saw this yesterday. I wasn't trying to be negative, but we were at the bike in yesterday, and you could see. I mean, this was one of the first times I've really noticed this because of the heat. But we were in the bike, and you could see some of the very, very top end, high age groupers that are really going after probably Kona slots, podiums, whatever it is, basically throwing caution to the wind, and you could see it on their face when they came in. Now, given everybody coming off a 160-mile bike is going to be pretty much like, please get me off this bike. I'm
Right.
just ready to be done. But then when you add in the heat that it was yesterday, I can imagine the last 30 miles were just like you know, body surfing on pavement is probably
Mm.
what it felt like. And I actually commented, I was like, that guy's fried. That guy's fried. Most of them are guys because that's what guys do. We just we just don't care. Our egos drive the train. We got to make that. We got to hold this watt. We got to hold this, percentage of our FTP. We have to have a 520 bike split because if we don't, then Best Bike Split told me that if I row, this is my split day, so I got to marry myself to it. I got to do it. And people looked fried, absolutely fried. And then you saw them like 2 seconds later walking. And races like this, I think, just highlight and hopefully magnify the importance that athletes should take on learning their body and understanding what feels and truly is easy, what truly is and feels hard, and then everything in between. And then adjusting expectations, like marrying yourself to a pace and being programmed. You're asking for one specific perfect result based on perfect conditions and the perfect fitness for that day with your body responding exactly how you want it to. Everything else is epic failure. When you're given it's like I had a this isn't even this athlete didn't even know that we're going to talk about this today, but he's an athlete student Ironman. Louisville sent me a really good article on grit, and it's one of the titles of the kind of the mini subjects in there was called "Discipline is the Master Ingredient." And on a day like yesterday, the most disciplined athletes that put ego aside and expectation aside, and the only thing that they focused on was the discipline of effort and the discipline of execution, were the ones that did the best. Not the ones who took the most risks, but the one who took the least amount of risks. And I think that there's so much to be said, and I want to give just a huge shout out to everyone who finished yesterday. And we had all of our athletes finished Maryland, all of our athletes finished Chattanooga. It's so refreshing as a coach to work with athletes that are so tough. And I just think that sometimes as triathlon and triathletes kind of can get ribbed on for not being tough and kind of being whiny and we want everything perfect. I saw so many displays of toughness yesterday, all over the place, that it was really, although they weren't probably going as fast as they wanted to, as spectators that were basically like fighting over the prime real estate that was shade. It was pretty awesome to watch so many athletes toughing it out with no care in the world what their watch said, as long as they made it to the finish line. And I just wanted before I forgot to mention it or got into late into the podcast, is to really give a shout out to everybody who just toughed it out, showed that discipline, and displayed their grit and their resolve to be so resilient on what was such a very tough day.
I couldn't agree with you more, man. We saw so much of that. It's like, especially, you see people, we were sitting at the start of the second loop, and these people have to go out and do that again, and to see the look on their face, just to be able to suck that up and keep moving forward it really is something that I don't want to say, you kind of get proud that there's people that actually do that. You know, I do. I kind of get that feeling.
Amen. Yeah.
It's like, why? You know, there's so we always talk about your why, and you can kind of, when I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, geez, why are they doing this today? You know, it's kind of easy to get into that soft place in life,
Hmm.
and not push yourself, but and I'm sure that most people that were entering that, you know, deep into the darkness, entering a second loop, they're just like asking that question a million times, and I think that's part of the process. You have to ask yourself why, and hopefully, when you're out there, kind of alone, just digging deep, you know, you come up with some answers, you know, and whether or not that becomes something you want to do again, or it helps you find a different answer, then you know, then it's working, and I think that's part of the process.
And just to think how much that you learn throughout that game, what you learn about yourself and what you can overcome. And I think that like I think it's one of those things that people just tend to not anticipate the impact that can come to you as a person, not just triathlon related, but as an individual. That if you can go through something like that, and then when and obviously it's like it's triathlon, so it's not like life or death, but to go into a race where you have expectations and you've probably trained all year with these times and these goals in your mind, and then it get to a point to where you basically have said, you know what, I always thought those mattered. I always attached myself to the accomplishment of the day, also equating to these specific results for my swim, my bike, and my run in these splits. And that's what kind of the tangible result was going to be, and it was going to be a collage of all my expectations and everything that I wanted. And then you found yourself walking or slowly running or just not having the day you thought at mile 5 or mile 6 or mile 7. So everything that you thought, every premise that you had, every expectation that you had, you know, spoken to existence on friends, you know, with friends or on Facebook or on Instagram, were all gone. And
Yeah.
all that was left was you and your thoughts and what was actually going to drive you to getting to the finish. Because it was none of those other things. And it might not even have been your why, but you may have found your new why, or maybe you found your why not. And I think that those are learning experiences that can't be taught, or they can be learned, but they can't just they're just things that you have to experience first. And I think that again, like the people that I saw in their faces, like, you know, towards the end of the night, especially we were on the pedestrian bridge, you know, it was, I don't know, it was kind of special, like to watch people. And I think as people kind of, I don't want to say poo-poo the athletes that are towards the back of the pack, I always see more growth, and more kind of like life-changing smiles and resiliency those last 3 to 4 hours that I see in the first. I think it's just, I think everybody learns, everybody grows, and everyone has their own obstacles no matter what end of the spectrum you finish them, whether it's in the 8 hour range at a pro, the 10 or 12 hour range as a middle of the pack age grouper, or towards the end. I think the experiences are different, but I think the amount of growth and knowledge that you have when you get to do something like this is one of the things that people don't anticipate, and is actually what ends up changing them for the good that they didn't see coming when the race is over.
So true. Um, we're always talking about that, right? When we see people kind of like it's like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and they're going out on the second loop, and we're just like, man, just what's driving them right now, and you can just see it in their eye too. They're just walking up, and they look. A lot of times, it's sort of like this angry look, or like just super focused look, and you're like, you know, hang in there, man, good job, and they'll
Hmm.
always kind of smile and say thank you, you know, and they know what's going on. They totally, I mean, no, more than anybody, they know what they're facing, and it's not pretty. But just to go and get through that, what that feels like, because on the same token, we're in the same place where the race was ending, right? So we're seeing
Right.
people come along, and you saw it. I mean, we always see it. It's just like the unbelievable, I guess, relief in some regard, but just that the how that feeling shifts when you hit that bridge the second time and come off it is it's really kind of amazing what, you know, 2 hours or so, 3 hours
Hmm.
can do to just sort of and how you can change your place in the world in that short of time, the way you think about things.
It's just it's yeah, and again, like that's why the sport is so great. That's why, I think everyone kind of finds a way to come back to it, and find a way to keep doing it. And even when they say they just don't want to do one, or 24 hours later, you're like, man, like I can't ever imagine doing this ever again. Period. Don't, I am out of it. I'm done. No, thank you. Then like days go by and you start to remember like little bits and pieces of the race that you couldn't remember like right when it was over, and you kind of find yourself thinking like, all right, I gained so much in this one experience, and the result, digitally may not have been what I wanted it to, but man, the things that I learned, the people that I met, the stories that I have, like it's just one of those things that I think is hard to describe. I think we talked about this, maybe it was around this time last year, or maybe it was even the year before, but just you can't describe to somebody what that feeling is like on the red carpet unless you've actually been there. You just can't. It is the sum of all emotions. It is the sum of all your hard work. It is the sum of all obstacles you overcame. And at that point in time is irrelevant, because it is a true celebration and show of everything that you can persevere. And I think that, as I was kind of joking in our closed Crushing Iron group, or our Facebook group yesterday, I was like, I can't wait for the 2016 versus 2019 Ironman Chattanooga, fights to happen about what race was hotter. And then you got, Texas and Coeur d'Alene, and they're like, well, you just obviously didn't know what it was like racing in 2015 Ironman Louisville, dude. It was like, it was 137 degrees. I mean, I remember I was there. And so like we're all prisoners of the moment when stuff like that is. We always think our race is the toughest. But I think one of the biggest things that athletes forget as we attach ourselves to these kind of prisoner of the moment feeling, and I think when athletes say that, I think it's also an affirmation of what I was saying before. And my belief is that the toughest race you're about to do or that you've ever done is the one you're about to do. Because when you do it, there's always something you take from it. It's like that was it. That was easily the toughest race I've ever done. No matter what the heat was, no matter how cool it was, how windy, like it was the hardest race ever. Louisville, 17 versus Louisville 18. Oh, 18, it was just infinitely harder.
Oh
It was
yeah.
the hardest one ever. Like this, you can't even compare. Like, that was basically perfect conditions. So like we just think that we forget that, and in the same breath, I think that we as people and as humans and athletes, we are able to do these things. Like think about, even no regardless of the distance and the length of the event and how long it took you, think about all the things you had to overcome to get there. Think about all the obstacles, all the scheduling conflicts, all the sicknesses or injuries, or family deaths or job changes, or moving to a different state, or relationship upheaval, or and then all the time you invested. Like, and then you got to this day, and nothing ever goes perfect, so things happened, and you made it through. And then a month later, you remember the fact that you're an Ironman, but then something else happens in your life, and you think, I just don't know how I'm going to get through it. And you like totally forget everything that you did, everything you were able to accomplish. I just think it's fascinating,
It is.
the memory that we had. And I try to remind, like I had an athlete message me the other day. I was like, hey, I'm going to end up having this procedure in a few months. I know I'm going to be off for a week. I don't know how I'm going to make it through, but I'm going to. I want to keep training for this half marathon. And I was like, right. I was like, this isn't a big deal, because 3 months ago you were worried you had cancer. Let's reshape the way that we think and appreciate where we are, and also just remember everything that we've done, everything that you've accomplished, what it takes. Because again, like we've said this before, just getting to the start line is massive.
Yeah.
Just getting there is massive. And so I think that, again, while it's great to walk down and buy your finisher gear and be happy and you feel like a celebrity, and you should, for doing for working so hard. I think, doing the distance and doing the day is great, but putting in all the hard work to get there and then go through it, I think is what means the most. But I think we just forget too often when our memory is so short on the good things that we did and the things we were able to overcome versus when something else bad happens in our life, and then we kind of feel like all of a sudden like we're so vulnerable all of a sudden and we can't overcome it, and we just totally forgot what we've been able to achieve. And I think that's one of those experiences that I think we should all kind of look back on with a little more appreciation, and acknowledge the impact that it can have in other aspects of our life if we choose to apply it, if we choose to remember it.
Yeah. For me, it's like, and I still struggle with that. I've done races every year for a while, and it's like this thing. It's the big elephant in the room. It's just sitting out there, but you forget the daily process, and you forget the parts about being in the moment. And that's really prevalent when the week of the race, especially, you start. It's like kind of like everything else in your world goes out the window. So that's the kind of thing I've been really trying to get better at, I guess, is this idea of existing in the day, in the moment, and understanding what these challenges are. And that's why I like to write about that kind of stuff a lot, even if it's not published, because it reminds me of what I've gone through. And more importantly, maybe, is how these things relate to everyday life. And I think that's where this podcast kind of comes from, really, is like this is the sort of stuff we talked about years and years ago, how some of these tough training days can translate into tough work days or tough days dealing with the family or whatever the case may be. And just as getting, I guess, I don't want to say getting used to it, or just understanding that things are not always easy. And if you can step back and realize that you've been through so many different situations and you're capable of it, and if you don't get overwhelmed by something, you can stand back and make a logical decision
Hmm.
that works out better for everybody. But it's not easy, man. Uh, every time I go through these training, it just sort of takes over your brain, and you're kind of looking out at this prize and not appreciating what it takes to get there. And that's just a everyday thing. I mean, I look at these podcasts, and we always talk about how weird it is to say, if we'd have started this thing and said, hey, we're doing 300 of these. And can you imagine? Like, I just feel like it would have been a lot different. We would have had this sort of pressure on ourselves, or whatever the case may be, to get up and we got to get 300, man. We got to get to that
Hmm.
race day. We got to make it to race day. Well, we're just doing it every day. And, you know, like the pop up podcast was just something we came up with, and we didn't want to put it into some big, like, stressful situation for us. We just kind of wanted to roll with it. And I think that's a microcosm of all this stuff. Is like, you don't have to win the race every day, and you don't have to think about that every day. You just got to move in that direction and realize it and be able to remember it.
Well, the thing is you can't win it every day. I think again, like it's a lesson. It's a huge lesson in expectations. And I know that I say this way too often, but I'll say it again. Expectations are just future resentments. And because the thing is like if the way that I love to approach things, and I think like one of the more probably frustrating aspects for some of the athletes that I work with, and that want answers in 3 months. Where do you think I'm going to be in 3 months? I have zero idea. Zero. And if a coach tells you they know where you're going to be in 3 months, they're lying to you. But the thing is, I don't have any, and I'll have athletes that ask, like, what are your expectations of me, or what do you think I can do on race day? No idea. Do I have a thought
Yeah.
about what maybe they could have on their best day in the best conditions if they're feeling perfect? 100%. I totally have an idea. I've shared some of those with you before in the past, and I've been within a few minutes of what it can happen. But on the flip side of that expectation is if I speak it into existence, then the pressure mounts, the expectation is there, and then what are you really going to do? Because the chances of that exact thing happening are it's minimal. It's so slim. And so the expectation I always have is I want you to put forth the effort and I want you to execute. Those are my only expectations. But also to listen to yourself. and listen to your body and make those decisions. And I've started to do this, and I think I should do it more. Even though I truly believe that every athlete that I work with already kind of intrinsically knows this. But some athletes are harder to break through than others. And before this race in Chattanooga, I made it a point to be like, hey, just so you know, in no way, shape, or form, no matter what happens today, are you going to disappoint me. It's not possible. As long as you put forth the effort, as long as you're smart, you have a good day, you're not going to disappoint me. Because I think and something I don't think people talk about a lot in maybe open or in public is how athletes feel like they can disappoint their coaches, or they're scared to disappoint their coaches, like they're like they're in a dictatorship and a very uneven, maybe unhealthy relationship. It's like that's an expectation driven, high pressure situation. Is like, it's, to me, it's that kind of relationship is based on fear and met expectations, which neither one of those two are positive and beneficial and something that you would like in that to cultivate growth and trust and prosperity in your performance for weeks and then months and then going towards years. So when you remove that, and I think you kind of allow things to, I don't want to say blossom, but to grow organically with appropriate load and removal of stress and, good feedback and open communication and I don't want to say taking things cautiously, but just being appropriate. Like, there's the best compliment as a coach you can ever get is, I feel like the load is appropriate, and I never get too beat down. I never feel overtrained. I never feel too tired. I always feel like it's just right. That's the best compliment you can get as a coach. If it's overreaching and if it's overextending, then you're doing something wrong. You need to change it. But so when I think, like, from an expectation standpoint, again, like, that's why I don't want to say the removal of expectations has to be there totally. I think you need to have goals. I think you need to have a general outline of the progress and the direction that we're going. But the when we're going to get there, that should be like left blank, because you don't know. Like, I sent a text to an athlete this morning. I was like, hey, really happy with your running. You're showing great durability. Your running's improving. Good work. And he was like, yeah, we're getting there. And I hadn't responded yet, but I was like, yeah, well, technically we're always getting there. We're never really there. And I think that's, again, like giving, as we've talked about before, like having races as expiration dates. We also have these like little markers, or a threshold on the bike, or a pace on the run, or a pace on the swim even. And you're like, yeah, I'm not there yet. I'm just not there. I got to get there. And then you're either never getting there, and then once you get there, you're not that satisfied, because you're like, all right, what's next? Instead of kind of having that thought process of, I'm kind of, and this is how it's supposed to be really, is I should be always just kind of getting there.
Mm-hmm.
Like slow, incremental. I should never be there. Because if you're there, then you're done. It's over. It's like, this isn't a mountain to climb where you get to the top and then it's over. It's a constant incline. It's a constant grade where you should be always moving forward and trying to always get better. And it might not show up in a day, and it might show up in a week. It should just show up on a Wednesday. And you're like, holy crap, like, I'm in the middle of my marathon training and I just ran my fastest 10K in training on tired legs. Hello, waving, flags. That's how it's supposed to be. Like, that's how it's supposed to be. And then obviously race day is a different story, but it should just happen. It should just materialize, and think about how much happier you are as an athlete to think every day, I've got to go out, I've got to hit an 8-minute pace, because if I don't have an 8-minute pace, I'm not going to be able to run an 8-minute marathon. And if I can't run an 8-minute marathon, then what am I going to do? I'm just getting slower. Versus just think, what, I got to go run for time today. I got to do it by feel. I got to do the best that I can. Some days are going to be great. Some days are going to be terrible. And the rest of the days are just going to be what we would call uneventful, nothing else to say, or no drama. It's just is what it is. And then all of a sudden you upload your training peaks. You go get a recovery drink. You sit back down. You look at it, and this little thing pops up, and it's like passes 10K of your life. You're like, oh shit, hello. And at the same time, is it gratifying? 100%. And you see that things are working. But on the other end, the other non-feeling is like, you don't get too overly excited You know what I mean? Like you're not like
Yeah.
because with expectations comes all this built up pressure of achievement that it's like, parades and glitter and fireworks and streamers, like we did it, we got it. And then you like crash. But if there's no expectation there and you're not chasing it every single day and you just kind of stumble upon it, you're like, "Oh, all right, moving on. What's next? Okay, 30-minute run tomorrow, I'm doing it." It's that mentality that just chips away at who you are at your core as your best self. You don't just find it overnight. You don't just become who you are in a day. You become who you are because of experiences and obstacles, the good, the bad, the ugly, over years and years and years and years. Like if you go back and ask Mike, tell me the differences, and I know this, tell me the differences of you today versus you 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's like night and day. Same thing would be for me. Like, when did that happen?
Right.
Well, I mean, for me,
Yeah, you
it's like when
can't.
I stopped. For me, it's like, yeah, I stopped drinking. But still, in the last 2 or 3 years, you've seen changes in me too. It's like you can't just put it on a day. It's something that happens. And again, I think that's what creates the most value. But I also, and most importantly, believe that's also what makes things the most sustainable.
Yeah, change is a process, man. You when you said that, yeah, I was thinking about that. Back to the beginning of my whole training stuff after I did my first half marathon, and how literally I was limping hardcore for 2 weeks, right? And fast forward to this year, doing Ironman Wisconsin, I felt fine after 2 days, like fine. So, but you forget these things, right?
Yeah, a little too fine.
Yeah, a little too fine.
Yeah, a little too fine.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's another
Yeah, it's
discussion,
another
but
another
yeah,
podcast.
you talk about disappointing your coach or whatever, and I actually heard, I was over by Battery Hill shooting video yesterday, and I heard a woman walking up the hill, and her friends were surrounding her, and she was kind of really down and out, as you can kind of imagine, and they're like trying to encourage her and say, "You're doing great," and she said, "I just feel so bad." And they're like, "Why?" And she said, I feel so bad. I'm disappointing you, and I'm making you stay out here longer than you had wanted to." And they were like, obviously, no, don't give us that business. We're super proud of you or whatever. But how that gets in your head is like why people feel, you know, that you're disappointing someone else is kind of a wild thought process. Because it's definitely something that you've churned up or internalized, and that's way unnecessary pressure to be putting on yourself, because it is one of those things that people are just not that judgmental usually, but I think there's a reason. Obviously they've been through it, and there's a reason they feel like they're disappointing somebody. So, but it's just hard to think about that. And I felt so bad for her to even have to think about running a complete another loop or whatever with that thought rolling through her head, that she was worried about keeping people out too late to watch her.
Well, I mean, listen, I think that's a whole different topic for a whole different day.
Yeah.
When it comes down to, because a lot of that, let's be honest, like a lot of that has nothing to do with triathlon. That's just how people ended up being wired over the course of their life. Like they're just so worried about disappointing people, and they're so codependent that their biggest fear is keeping you out on course longer. You know what I mean? Like that's a huge. But to add that pressure again, like you just said, like we like is it's like, do you need more pressure?
Yeah.
Like like it's time to keep things light. Like the morning before your race, like it's time to keep things light. Like and to keep things light on race day. Like that's why I always kind of blows my mind when I see like these real serious conversations happening between coaches and athletes on like race morning. Like my text messages are usually like, "Hey, have you pooped yet?" Like and no, let's get the let's talk about the stuff that really matters. Like, hey, have you hit the porta john yet? Are you cleaned out? Are you ready to go? Is the applesauce working? All right, good, perfect. It's time to be fun and light, because nothing that you say and do as a coach is going to matter to in terms of changing someone's fitness. Now the point is to be like, just have fun. Keep it light. And maybe give them one last piece of advice on execution. but it's execution based on them and how they're feeling, uh, not something that's based on, all right, you've got to come out of the water around like 10, 101. If you're not at 101, then you got to catch up. Like there's just so it's such a pressure-packed day with family and with friends and with coaches and with supporters and other people there. It's like, coaches' jobs should be your job as a coach should be to remove it, not add pressure, remove it. And I think that you see that like in some of the best coaches that are out there, in every sport is, yeah, like, do they hold you accountable? Sure. But you also want, like, you're not worried about disappointing them. You just want to make them proud.
Yeah.
And I think, again, like, that extra couple layers of what makes that coach proud is different for every coach. Like, again, like, I'm not naive, I'm not dumb. I know there are plenty of coaches out there that if you're the only way you're going to make them proud is if you PR, have a great time, or beat so and so. And then you have other coaches who, like, just do me proud by having fun and um executing and doing your best. Like,
Yeah.
that's it. Like, keep perspective, because again, like, I think, and I keep going back to this, the more and more that I get into coaching and hearing the experiences from athletes and then the things they go through and everything that's wrapped up in life, is that coaching is like, you're not just coaching an athlete, like, you're coaching a person. And first and foremost, that's exactly what you're doing, is you're coaching a person. And while you're helping them to hopefully achieve things on and of an athletic nature. That's why they hired you. Your purpose, or for some people, like most of them, your calling is to help them navigate the other aspects of their life, not as like a psychologist, even though most of it's like psychology and social work, but it's to hopefully get them to a point to where they can kind of change their mindset and remove these preconceived thoughts and expectations about themselves, and really kind of free themselves to. And I think this is true, and everybody that's listening that maybe feels like this is, I 100% firmly believe that in order for an athlete to achieve their best performance, to achieve what they are 100% capable of, mentally and emotionally, as the athlete and then as a coach, as you have to assist them, they have to remove all the negative thoughts, all the kind of what I would call the stinking thinking, and really just reframe who they see themselves as an athlete and as a person, and the perspective that they have on the sport, the objectivity they have when they train, the choices that they make, the sacrifices that they're willing to make or they're willing to not make, and understand that we're doing this for fun. And up until that point, up until they can kind of race free and race for fun, like, I truly believe that it is a hindrance to athletes to race paralyzed like that. And again, it goes back to expectations and how you race and how you train, because how you train is how you race. And if you don't understand your body and you're always so hard on yourself, then I guarantee there were so many athletes yesterday all over the country, no matter what race it was, especially if it was super hot on Saturday at Maryland. It was like, if you're an athlete who's just driven by success that is based on numbers or data or placement, then you failed. When your biggest accomplishment should be making it through and being happy to be there and executing a good plan. Because, again, like, to me, those are the most important things. And I think hopefully most athletes understand that. And I think that's why you see the happiest athletes the last, like, 2, 3, 4 hours of a race. Like, if you're watching an Ironman, like, in the tent, they're all so happy, they're like crying. It's because they've already learned that they're experiencing it, versus maybe, and it's not because of their athletic ability, it's because of just what happened that day. They're just so happy to just, the happiness and the perspective is different, versus the ones that are like already throwing the butts around. Well, I know it was a good day, but like, I really had them. Like, that's just like, stop it. It's just, again, it's one of the reasons why I love the sport, because it's so hard. There's so many facets to racing that encompass everything: psychological, mental, or that's the same thing, but emotional and physical, rather, that make this such a complicated sport. And the last thing I'll say is, that's another thing you should be addressing as an athlete. If you're only focusing on data and physical training, and you're totally ignoring the mental and emotional aspect of the sport and things that need to be shifted or changed, then you're doing yourself and your performance a disservice.
Now, if I may throw you out a little compliment here, is that gonna be all right?
Yeah, man, I am the greatest at taking compliments.
You've gotten a lot better.
Thank you.
But in all seriousness, I think that, we talk about athlete confidence and everything like that, but when I think coaching confidence is a massive thing too, because in experience and things that they've learned and going through a lot of things, because I think a lot of coaches that get into coaching triathlon or anything really, a lot of the background is, they kind of learned about coaching through watching like Newt Rockney movies or something like this, and go win one for the Gipper and get fired up and
For
whatever it
the
may be.
Gipper.
But yeah, there's and I think sometimes that can play into the right way, and in a team sport or something, when you're trying to rally a bunch of people to come together and things like that. But it's just so inappropriate when you're thinking about anyone other than maybe the top 20 people in a race. You know what I mean? It's sort of like
Mm-hmm.
that fine-tuned element that we were talking about yesterday, those Jan Frodeno type guys or whatever. I'm not even
Mm-hmm.
saying that they need it to that level, but there's just that's a whole different ball game up there. But you're talking
Yeah.
about people trying to do something amazing that they never thought they could even do. So it's about being patient, understanding that their long-term best interests and all these sorts of things that I think get ignored, because if you're trying to coach and you're not confident, you really have to start, hanging your hat on PRs and podiums and all those types of things all the time. And I'm sure it's super tempting, as I coach more often, it kind of gives you a little bit of a jolt when somebody just crushes it. But the reality is, and just like every Ironman race, the majority of the people aren't out there for that reason usually. And it's about getting better, and you're really good at keeping things on the rails like that. And I think that Wisconsin was a great example of that. We had between you and I about 30 people that did that race, and I think everyone I talked to was really happy with how things turned out for the most part, and I was probably the least happy, but but that's all right, because we talk every day, and I'm kind of a different animal sometimes with that stuff, but I'm not pissed. You know what I mean? It's just like I have a way to challenge myself, and I'm still working at it. But you have really dialed in that support kind of angle, and I think that's so huge with coaching, and the reiterating, living what you preach and stuff like that. And so I don't know, I just want to throw that out there. And I wanted to give also an example of one of our athletes yesterday, and we talked about Nate, who ended up having a fantastic race, top
Mm-hmm.
200. Thought he was undertrained probably. He's been super busy and all kinds of things going on, but what an attitude he brought to that race. He was just kind of like, all right. And we were calling him Steady Eddie. He was just kind of out there smiling
Steady Eddie.
and just taking the day as it came, and wound up in the top 200. I'm sure he's happy with that race, and he should be. I told him halfway through, I said, man, you're looking better than most people out there. And he's like, all right, brother. He just kind of just took it all in stride. I mean, it was a
Take
real
it all
in
in.
stride, you know, tough day out there for everybody. And I think if you could somehow find a happy place in there, you were ahead of the game.
Yeah, yeah. If you found any kind of, I mean, listen, the happy places yesterday were in the shade
Yeah, for
by the
sure.
ice
By the
cream
ice
shop.
cream shop.
Yeah, at the end of the pedestrian bridge. I gotta say, anyway, like, and we'll wrap it up with this. Chattanooga is an awesome town. It pains me that they've had weather like this the last 2 or 3 years, because it really isn't normally like this. I mean, I guess when you say that, it's a lie, because it has been. Even though, like, this coming weekend's supposed to be cooler, the previous weekend was cooler. Um, you gotta give a huge shout out to, I think, Brian. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but the race director, because from all accounts, they went above and beyond in terms of doing everything they could to set up the athletes for success, about putting as many opportunities on course for athletes to take care of themselves. I think I was reading an article in the paper this morning, is that like while there were quite a few DNFs, like I think I read like 300 to 400 on the bike alone,
Wow.
which is crazy that there were no like major medical incidences. And I think that so kudos to him for taking, every step, it seems like, to make sure that to ensure athlete safety. And I think a lot of times we rib on Ironman and things for canceling swims and being too cautious, but in some situations it is a life or death situation. And with the heat yesterday, it was dangerous. I mean, I legit said this on the way over, and I think in a few text messages, I was generally, I don't want to say I was scared, but I was fearful for some of the athletes and the conditions that it was going to be, and then not know. And some people just don't know when to shut it off and when not to. But so huge shout out to him for doing a great job putting the race on. And it is a great, it's just a great city. I obviously live here, so I'm kind of not as objective as I probably could be, but I definitely got to say there weren't as many spectators out and about yesterday. But let's be honest, the majority of spectators are family, spouses, a lot with kids, or parents of spectators, which are usually and oftentimes the older population. Ain't nobody sitting out there in 105-degree heat with kids or older. So most people are posted up in the shade, hiding out. But again, I'm sure registration will be up again next year. It's a great event. I encourage everybody to do it. Just like I encourage everyone to come back on Thursday and listen to our Thursday podcast, which will be the Ironman Louisville preview.
It will be, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That is in the rundown.
That is in the rundown. Ironman Louisville, 2 weeks. Less than 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's going to be
I'm predicting
50 degrees and raining. That's the preview.
I am predicting total sunshine, low 70s high.
Oh, boy.
Yep, you heard it here first, folks.
You're predicting that, huh?
I am predicting, not the weatherman. I'm predicting low 70s and all sunshine, with the low around 53, 54, maybe even 49.
Okay.
Heard it here. Book it.
Is it no rain, huh?
No rain. You can book that like I'm gonna book Tennessee getting beat by Georgia by 50.
And you can book it that we will be there as well.
We will be back. Oh, jeez. We'll be back. We'll be at Ironman Louisville.
Sounds like a perfect weather for a spectator.
It is. I could use it.
Are we taking the bus out to the bike?
I'm not taking the bus out to the bike. I think it's the biggest waste.
It's not that nice of weather.
It's not that nice. I gotta stick close to town.
We're going to be closer to the run, which will be nice. I am actually excited about the run course change.
I love Louisville. We'll be there in 2 weeks. We'll probably post a few things, maybe some opportunities to come hang out. We'll probably bring some gear. But we'll be there. We'll stay in the Marriott down there close to the finish line. Get in there on Friday night. So we'll be around, and then we'll definitely be watching the Kona live stream on Saturday. But we'll be there. I'm looking forward to it. Again, good luck to everyone who's racing. I hope you're tapering. And I guess, again, I hope you tune in on Thursday. If you haven't, subscribe, listen, review, go back in the archives, give it a listen. And also, crushingiron.com. That is our one-stop shop for all things training, coaching, swim analysis, our camps, gear, you name it, it's there. Swing by, check it out. Let us know what you think. And if you have questions, comments, or concerns, you can talk to Mike, crushingiron@gmail.com. And the same goes for me, C26Coach@gmail.com.
All right, buddy. Let's rest and recover and get ready for Thursday.
All right, sounds good, buddy.
See ya.